Hello, and welcome to today's session on bilingualism. As more and more people communicate on a global level due to travel or business purposes, there has been an increased interest in learning a second language. Some have started from an early age, resulting in a better overall understanding of the emotional and social contexts of the second language, while others have taken up a second language in adulthood. Learning a language at a later stage in life has shown that adults approach language issues in the second language more analytically or rationally than their first language, and in a less biased, emotional fashion than exhibited in young language learners. This session aims to define what it means to have a bilingual brain, identify the importance of knowing a second language in terms of its benefits, and suggest ways to integrate various aspects of language into the school environment via bilingual or dual language programming. So let's start with a definition of bilingualism. Being bilingual or knowing more than one language means that your brain may work and look differently to that of your monolingual counterparts. To explain this, you need to ask yourself what knowing a language actually means. Do you need to focus on pronunciation, on grammar, on how to communicate, or on all of the above? That's right, the answer is all of the above. Acquiring a language means having both a receptive and productive knowledge of it. By receptive, I mean focusing on reading and listening skills. By productive, I mean speaking and writing. If you speak two languages or are multilingual, your knowledge of the skills are not always balanced and used in equal proportion. Most bilinguals or multilinguals use their skills in a disproportional fashion. For example, you may find that some bilingual learners find they are more forthcoming with one skill than another, even though they know how to function in both areas. This generally happens as a consequence of their circumstance and how they came to learn the language or languages in the first place. Let me give you some scenarios to better explain my point. There are three types of bilinguals. Imagine a toddler who has immigrated with his siblings and parents to a new country where another language is spoken. This child, because of his experience, will probably develop two linguistic systems at the same time. His first language, as well as the second language, will be used simultaneously as he tries to process what is happening around him. And he will know both languages equally well and process them to fit any situation. This child is referred to as a compound bilingual, working in two languages but with one set of concepts, and with no distinction between the linguistic codes of the two languages he is working with. A second scenario is the following. The same child has an older sister, slightly older, and attending school in the new country. Because of her particular situation, the teenager already knows her first language quite well, and needs to be able to function in the second language to attend school and be part of the general school community. She finds herself working with two sets of concepts as she speaks the second language at school while continuing to communicate with friends and family in the first language outside the school environment. This means the sister belongs to the group of coordinate bilinguals. The third scenario focuses on the parents. They pertain to the group of subordinate bilinguals, where they start to learn the second language by making associations with their first language and filtering it through their first language. Needless to say, their first language will dominate their daily life. All three types of bilinguals can reach a high linguistic competence in all their languages, but their proficiency can change depending on their motivations and context, as these play a significant role in their bilingual development throughout their lives. Although many studies have been carried out regarding bilingualism, Those which were conducted before 1960 regarded learning two languages as a hindrance because research at the time considered that learners were being forced to distinguish between two or more language codes, which is more than they could handle mentally. The time and energy spent on these concurrent languages was believed to delay the learner's linguistic development. Understandably, in today's world, these views are seen as somewhat flawed. More recent examination has shown that the ability to switch between languages has, in effect, resulted in more positive activity in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex of the brain. This is the region which greatly influences the executive functions of the brain, such as cognitive flexibility, working memory, and abstract reasoning. Hence, according to research, being bilingual implies that your brain is actually more actively involved and healthier. In addition, neurologists have noticed how certain aspects of language learning have influenced a bilingual brain. It can be said that the brain's left hemisphere generally dominates and analyzes our rational processes, while the right hemisphere addresses emotional and social contexts. Although it is not an absolute division, it is safe to say that in language acquisition, children's brains use both hemispheres due to the neuroplasticity, i.e. the functional and physical flexibility of their brains, which are still developing. Adults, on the other hand, tend to use their left hemisphere when learning a language. So what does this imply? It basically means that being bilingual has important implications for the brain with regards to how it processes and represents the two or more languages being learned, and how it changes as a consequence of learning languages in general. In fact, when learning another language, the benefits are multiple. In addition to having a healthy and complex brain, being bilingual may delay, by up to 5 years, the onset of Alzheimer's or dementia because of the extended workout this type of brain receives during its lifetime. Furthermore, knowing more than one language can definitely enhance your competitiveness and facilitate communication in the global marketplace. The final part of this session is going to focus on how various aspects of language can be implemented into the school environment through dual language programming. It is true to say that having the skills and knowledge of one language can facilitate the learning of another. Studies that have been carried out using both monolingual and dual language programs have found that those who have learned using languages have done equally as well as those instructed only using their first language, and, if anything, have at times gone on to outperform their counterparts in literacy skills. As an exemplar, I'd like to focus on Canada. Both English and French are the official languages of the country. Although English is predominantly used, French is also spoken and taught from a very early age. Children who go through bilingual immersion at school tend to become more proficient readers at an earlier age and are better at solving problems as a result of having learned a second language. Learners are exposed to both languages simultaneously and are taught the second language through songs, games, crafts, and certain themes or topics. Integrating various parts of the language into the environment can eventually make it easier for the child to grasp and manipulate the languages for any situation. However, running a dual language program is not without its issues. Let's look at the kinds of programs available. There are two types of bilingual instruction. In the first category, you have two groups of students where one speaks, let's say English, their first language, and the other group speaks, let's say Arabic, their first language. So, all students take on the role of modeling the language and learning the language, but at different times of instruction as they teach and learn from each other. This is known as a two-way dual language program. The other category is a one-way dual language program where there is only one group of students learning two languages, their first language and the second language. Two native speaker teachers of the first language and second language Teach these languages simultaneously. Students are instructed in their first language 50% of the time, as well as the second language. This would be a typical scenario in Canada and Belgium, where English and French are spoken. The same would be typical of Florida in the USA, where both Spanish and English are taught. Despite the benefits of such immersion instruction, there are many challenges. One difficulty would be in recruiting well-qualified teachers who could teach the second language, knowing both its linguistic skills as well as its content. A second challenge would be finding appropriate textbooks in the second language that are aligned with the curriculum already in place for the first language. And thirdly, getting appropriate funding for each student at an immersion program school. This means trying to implement dual language programs is disadvantaged from the start with regard to financial assistance, teachers with the appropriate skill set, and resources. Naturally, these issues need to be addressed if we are to increase the number of these total immersion programs around the world. To wrap up, the key takeaways from the session have highlighted what it means to be bilingual, some benefits, and how to set up total immersion programs. I hope you enjoyed the session and it's given you food for thought. If you would like to explore more on any of the topics discussed, click on the links provided at the end of this unit. As always, remember to observe what is happening in your classes and be a reflective practitioner.